What happens when the brutal realities of war, the deeply ingrained expectations of enemy encounters, are suddenly, utterly upended by a simple, almost mundane gesture? What happens when the steel door of a notorious interrogation center clangs shut? Not on a snarling guard or the threat of violence, but on the quiet offer of a cup of coffee. It's a moment that can redefine an entire conflict, blurring the stark lines between friend and foe, and revealing the unexpected power of human connection, even in the darkest of times. Coffee? That single word, delivered in flawless English, was not at all what Lieutenant Bud Miller anticipated hearing. The moment the heavy steel door of Dulag Luft, the Luftwaffe's infamous interrogation center, clanged shut behind him, a cacophony of grim expectations echoed in his mind. He braced himself for the sharp crack of a pistol whip, the guttural snarl of an angry guard, or perhaps even the chilling business end of a high-pressure fire hose. Instruments of coercion that the rumor mill, churning furiously on the rattling train that brought him here, had so vividly described. He had spent the agonizing journey rehearsing the stoic mantra of name, rank, serial number, steeling himself against the inevitable onslaught, praying he wouldn't break. Instead, a Luftwaffe major, his uniform impeccably pressed, his demeanor surprisingly calm, placed two delicate porcelain cups on a small table. He then leaned in, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips, and asked, with a surprising gentleness that completely disarmed Bud, "Cream or sugar?" In that singular, bewildering instant, the very war Bud thought he understood, the clear-cut, black-and-white conflict between good and evil, flipped upside down. It was a moment of profound disorientation, a subtle but seismic shift in the psychological landscape of captivity. Stay with us until the very end, and you'll discover the astonishing ripple effects of that strange, unexpected cup of coffee. You'll learn how it not only reshaped Allied intelligence strategies, but how it directly saved American lives, and, perhaps most remarkably, how it transformed a Nazi interrogator into the most unlikely, yet cherished, guest at a Texas barbecue a quarter-century later. This isn't just a story about a pilot and his captor. It's a deeper exploration into the unexpected intricacies of human nature under duress, and how the quiet battles of wit and empathy can sometimes yield more profound victories than any bomb run or dogfight. The date was March 18, 1944. The time, precisely 11:42 a.m. The air over war-torn Europe was thick with the roar of engines and the acrid smell of high explosives. Bud Miller, strapped into the cockpit of his B-17 Flying Fortress, affectionately nicknamed Shady Lady, was part of the 385th Bomb Group. They were limping home, a battered and weary procession from a devastating raid on Munich. The mission had been brutal. Flak, those deadly shards of anti-aircraft artillery, had already shredded the belly of Shady Lady, tearing through metal and nerves alike. The bomber was a wounded bird, struggling against gravity and the grim arithmetic of war. Then, out of the sun, that classic terrifying maneuver of aerial combat, a lone Focke-Wulf 190 fighter materialized. It wasn't just attacking, it was walking the wing, a chillingly precise and deliberate strafing run. Tracer fire, like fiery needles, raked across the number 3 engine. The cockpit, already a tense environment, instantly filled with thick, choking smoke, obscuring Bud's vision and tightening the knot of fear in his gut. The situation was dire, beyond salvage. With a heavy heart, knowing the grim odds but prioritizing his crew's survival, Bud gave the order. Bail out. At 18,000 feet over the bleak, unfamiliar landscape of the Saarland, his crew plunged into the cold, unforgiving air. Bud himself landed with an unceremonious thud in a freshly tilled beet field, the spring mud instantly sucking at his ankles, pulling him into its cold embrace. Disoriented, vulnerable, and alone, his brief moment of respite was shattered by the appearance of two Hitler-Jugend boys. Armed with crude but menacing pitchforks, their young faces hardened by the rhetoric of war, they marched him, a downed American flyer, to the local constable. It was a stark reminder of the pervasive reach of the conflict, even into the seemingly innocent countryside. By nightfall, his fate sealed. He found himself crammed into a crowded, rattling rail car, its destination a name that struck fear into the hearts of Allied airmen. Oberursel, the Luftwaffe's premier interrogation center. The rumor mill on that creaking, swaying train was a grim, whispered symphony of terror. Beatings, starvation, mock executions, these were the chilling tales passed from one captured airman to another, each word a hammer blow against their dwindling hope. Bud spent the entirety of that agonizing ride, the rhythmic clack of the wheels against the rails, a relentless metronome of dread, rehearsing his name-rank serial number, clinging to the only defense he knew. He prayed, with every fiber of his being, that he wouldn't break. He prayed he wouldn't betray his comrades, his mission, or his country. But what if the enemy didn't play by the rules of brutality he expected? What if the battlefield of interrogation was far more insidious, far more complex than he could ever imagine? Upon arrival, Oberursel presented a facade that was utterly disarming, almost surreal. It looked, to Bud's bewildered eyes, less like a notorious enemy prison and more like a rather dull provincial boarding school. Ivy, thick and green, clung to the stone walls, softening their harsh edges. In the yard, a volleyball net, incongruously out of place amidst the grim realities of war, sagged gently. There was even a meticulously maintained flower bed, its blooms arranged in the unmistakable chilling shape of the Balkenkreuz, the German cross. It was a jarring contrast, a deliberate dissonance designed, perhaps, to lull the unwary into a false sense of security. Inside, the sensory details continued to confound. The corridors, instead of reeking of stale fear and institutional despair, carried the faint, almost clinical scent of strong soap, mingled with the faint, disappointing aroma of weak coffee. It was a strange, unsettling perfume for a place of such dark repute. Guards, surprisingly polite, confiscated Bud's flight jacket, a standard procedure, a stripping away of his identity as a warrior. But then, in another unexpected twist, handed him a Red Cross parcel, unopened, a small, almost human gesture amidst the dehumanizing process of capture. He was then unceremoniously shoved into a narrow room, its walls painted a nauseating, sickly shade of institutional green. It was a sparse, almost sterile space. A small utilitarian table dominated the center, flanked by two equally stark chairs. And then there was the mirror, a large, imposing rectangle of glass on one wall, obviously a mirror, yet its presence immediately suggested something more sinister, something observed. Bud's training screamed at him. This was a setup. Every detail, from the weak coffee to the polite guards, was a calculated move. Then the door opened again, and the man with the coffee stepped in. This was Hauptmann Hans Scharf, a man whose seemingly ordinary persona belied his extraordinary role. He was 34, a former textile salesman, a father of two, and, in his spare time, a hobby watercolorist. Yet, in the crucible of war, he had become something else entirely. The Luftwaffe's top intelligence extractor, a master of a psychological game. He introduced himself not with a barked command or a threatening glare, but with the refined, almost deferential air of a headwaiter in a fine restaurant. "I am your host," he announced, his English as impeccable as his uniform. "Let us make this as pleasant as possible." Bud's extensive training, drilled into him through countless hours of simulated interrogations, screamed, "Trap!" Every fiber of his being recoiled. sensing the insidious nature of this politeness. But Scharf's smile, gentle and seemingly genuine, projected an entirely different message. Friend. It was a masterful, almost theatrical opening. The duel, a silent battle of wills and wits, had begun, not with threats or coercion, but with an offer of comfort, a deceptive invitation to lower one's guard. What kind of enemy begins a confrontation by offering kindness? This was a question that would haunt Bud, and many others, long after the war's end. The initial interrogation session unfolded in a manner completely antithetical to Bud's expectations. Scharf didn't launch into aggressive questioning about bomber formations, flight paths, or strategic targets. His approach was far more subtle, a delicate dance around the periphery of information. He began by lamenting, with a theatrical sigh, how dreadfully German coffee had become since the Allied blockade tightened its grip. He wondered aloud, with an almost childlike curiosity, whether Americans truly put cinnamon in their brew, a seemingly innocuous detail, yet one designed to elicit a natural, unguarded response. Bud, grateful for the unexpected warmth of the porcelain cup in his hands, and perhaps a flicker of relief that he wasn't facing immediate torture, offered a shrug. "Some folks do," he admitted, a small, involuntary concession to the shared humanity of the moment. It was a tiny crack in the wall of silence he had vowed to maintain, but a crack nonetheless. Suddenly, a guard appeared, not with clubs or chains, but with a tray. On it sat a platter of steaming golden apple strudel. Scharf, with a gesture of almost paternal solicitude, nudged the plate towards Bud. "My wife overbaked again," he sighed, a master stroke of domestic normalcy designed to further disarm his captive. While Bud, surprised and perhaps a little starved, chewed on the sweet pastry, Scharf, with an air of casual distraction, pulled out a scrap of paper and began to sketch. His pen moved deftly, creating a small, whimsical cartoon of a bulldog wearing flying goggles. He slid it across the table. "Is this your squadron mascot?" he inquired, his eyes twinkling with feigned innocence. The absurdity of the situation, the unexpected flash of humor, was too much for Bud. Despite himself, a short, involuntary laugh escaped him. "Close," he managed, a genuine smile touching his lips for the first time since his capture. "But ours is a raccoon with boxing gloves." With that laugh, that genuine human response, the first brick in Bud's carefully constructed wall of silence crumbled. It was a seemingly insignificant detail, a throwaway comment about a mascot. But for Scharf, it was a goldmine. He noted the unit insignia in his mental ink, filing it away with the precision of a seasoned intelligence officer. Later, he would correlate that seemingly innocent piece of information with today's crash reports, cross-referencing it with the known symbols of Allied squadrons. The puzzle pieces would click into place, confirming the 385th Bomb Group's presence in the raid. Score 1 for courtesy. Score 1 for the power of a shared laugh and a piece of strudel. It was a chilling testament to Scharf's methodology. Information bleeds fastest not through pain, but through the veins of conversation, through the subtle act of making the enemy feel heard, and momentarily less hunted. The afternoon session continued the subtle psychological warfare, a quiet escalation in Scharf's art of extraction. He unfurled a large, exquisitely detailed aeronautical chart of the Rhineland across the small table. It was a magnificent piece of cartography, filled with intricate markings, topographical contours, and the delicate tracery of rivers and roads. Scharf offered a preemptive apology, a charmingly disingenuous excuse. "We are quite out of writing paper, I'm afraid, so I must improvise and use this." It was a clever maneuver, presenting a valuable military asset as a mere substitute for stationery, downplaying its significance while simultaneously drawing Bud's focus to it. With a fountain pen, he began to draw, not military symbols, but simple, almost childlike stick-figure bombers, streaming towards Berlin. As his pen moved, he hummed a tune, a familiar lilting melody. "Begin the Begin," he identified it, with a casual air, asking Bud if the song was popular back home in America. It was another carefully placed conversational hook, designed to elicit a natural, unthinking response, to draw Bud further into the illusion of a friendly chat. Bud, caught in the web of Scharf's relaxed demeanor, nodded almost imperceptibly. His eyes, however, were fixed. They were riveted, not on the stick figures, but on the intricate details of the map itself. His pilot's instinct, honed by countless hours of navigating wartime skies, took over. Without conscious thought, without any deliberate intention to reveal classified information, his finger twitched. Almost imperceptibly, it tapped a spot on the map, a particular town, a specific geographical feature. It was the precise location where Shady Lady, his B-17, had jettisoned its bombs during the desperate moments before bailout. A tiny, involuntary muscle spasm, a subconscious reaction to the visual stimulus of the map. Scharf, ever the astute observer, missed nothing. He saw the almost imperceptible twitch, the subtle, unconscious gesture. In his mind, with the precision of a photographic memory, he circled the town of Schweinfurt in invisible ink. The information, a critical piece of the puzzle, had been acquired. And then, with practiced ease, he smoothly changed the topic, transitioning seamlessly to a discussion about American baseball, a subject far removed from the grim realities of aerial warfare. The consequence of that single unconscious tap was devastating. Within 48 hours, that seemingly innocent slip of information would prove catastrophic. German fighter units, now armed with the knowledge of a likely target area, would be rerouted, their patrols intensified around Schweinfurt. When the 8th Air Force launched its next strike against that vital industrial center, they flew directly into a prepared ambush. The cost was brutal. 14 more American bombers and their crews were lost. One tap, 14 aircraft. Such was the chilling, merciless arithmetic of conversation. A stark reminder that in the hands of a master interrogator, even the most innocent gesture could have deadly repercussions. The map, presented as a mere doodle pad, had become a weapon, and Bud, unwittingly, had helped aim it. By day 3, the psychological game continued to unfold with an almost theatrical precision, each act revealing a new layer of Scharf's sophisticated methodology. This time, Scharf introduced a fresh American parachute into the interrogation room. But it wasn't presented as a piece of captured enemy equipment. Instead, he held it up, its silken fabric now being meticulously restitched into silk stockings for German housewives. It was a tangible, poignant symbol of wartime scarcity, of resources repurposed for the home front. Scharf bemoaned the chronic material shortages plaguing the Reich, a seemingly candid complaint designed to elicit empathy, to foster a sense of shared hardship. He then posed another seemingly innocuous question, laced with an almost childlike wonder. Did nylon ladies' hosiery in the States truly cost only $2? It was a question steeped in economic curiosity, a subtle probe into the enemy's material wealth. Bud, perhaps feeling a pang of patriotic pride, or simply caught in the rhythm of polite conversation, immediately corrected him. More like $1.50, he stated. Then instantly, profoundly, regretted volunteering even this seemingly trivial piece of economic data. The words were out, another small, almost imperceptible leak in his mental defenses. Scharf, however, clapped his hands together with a genuine, almost joyful exclamation. "Ah, a bargain!" he declared, his eyes alight with feigned delight, further cementing the illusion of a harmless exchange. Then came another astonishing deviation from standard prisoner treatment. Scharf escorted Bud outside, without handcuffs, without an armed guard clinging to his elbow. It was an unprecedented act, a calculated display of trust designed to shatter Bud's expectations of captivity. They took a leisurely stroll along the compound fence, a scene utterly alien to the typical prisoner experience. Prisoners usually saw the yard only from the depressing confines of their barred windows, their world circumscribed by iron and glass. Scharf offered a simple, almost therapeutic explanation. Exercise aids memory. As they walked, a column of brand-new Focke-Wulf 190s, sleek and deadly, began to taxi on the adjoining airfield. The roar of their engines, the glint of sun on their freshly painted fuselages, was a powerful, visceral display of German air power. Bud, his professional instincts overriding his caution, couldn't help himself. His eyes widened, his gaze automatically counting each aircraft, his mind meticulously noting the distinctive rocket bomb slung menacingly under each wing. It was a critical piece of operational intelligence, a detail that revealed a new, potent German weapons system. Scharf, ever the silent observer, watched the pupils of the American pilot widen, saw the involuntary flicker of recognition and concern in his eyes. He filed away the intelligence with his usual precision. The presence of aerial mortars was still a secret to the Allies. Bud, in his momentary lapse, had just confirmed the efficacy of German camouflage and secrecy regarding this new weapon. Score another quiet victory for Scharf, achieved not through threats or force, but through a seemingly benevolent walk and a carefully orchestrated display of military might. It was a chilling illustration of how easily vital information could be gleaned when the captive's guard was systematically, subtly lowered. By week's end, the psychological landscape of Bud's captivity had been thoroughly rewired. He found himself engaged in an activity that, just days prior, would have seemed utterly impossible: writing a letter to his mother, on paper thoughtfully supplied by the Luftwaffe. Scharf, ever the courteous host, promised that the Red Cross would dutifully mail it. Bud, ever the trained officer, was meticulous in his self-censorship. The letter contained nothing remotely operational, nothing that could compromise the Allied war effort. Yet, the mere act of trusting his enemy with these intimate, family words, of engaging in this small, personal ritual of normalcy, began to subtly rewire his emotions, blurring the sharp, defined edges of his animosity. As the days turned into weeks, other captured Allied crews began to arrive at Oberursel. They were housed in barracks, and in the evenings, amidst the muted sounds of captivity, they would swap stories. To a man, every single one of them had met the friendly Major. Hans Scharf was a legend in the making, a figure of bewildering charm and unsettling effectiveness. Some of the new arrivals, clinging to their pride and their training, bragged that they had given him nothing, that their walls of silence had remained impenetrable. Others, however, admitted to small, seemingly insignificant lapses. They may have let slip the name of their hometown, or their wife's first name, or the seemingly harmless fact that their squadron had recently switched from P-47 Thunderbolt to P-51 Mustang support. Each piece, a small thread in the tapestry of Allied air operations, woven unknowingly into Scharf's intelligence reports. What struck Bud and all the others was the profound absence of the expected horrors. None of them had been slapped, or waterlogged, or subjected to days of sleep deprivation. The physical brutalities that were the hallmark of so many other prisoner-of-war camps were conspicuously absent here. Instead, the greatest torment, the most insidious form of psychological pressure, was the disarming sense of gratitude they began to feel toward their courteous captor. It was a profound emotional paradox. How could one feel grateful to the man who was, by definition, the enemy? This unexpected kindness, this meticulous politeness, was a weapon far more potent, far more subtly destructive to their resolve than any physical torture could have been. It chipped away at their identity as hardened warriors, replacing it with a complex, unsettling mix of respect and confusion. As the relentless tide of Allied armies swept eastward across Europe, the war entered its final brutal phase. By March 1945, the Allied forces had reached the Rhine, a symbolic and strategic barrier. The advance forced the German High Command to begin evacuating key installations, and Oberursel, the seemingly placid interrogation center, was no exception. Bud, along with countless other prisoners, was marched eastward, then south. A weary, hungry journey through the crumbling landscape of the Third Reich. The specter of a desperate, final stand by the Germans loomed large, and the fate of the prisoners remained uncertain. Then, one glorious day, outside the historic city of Nuremberg, the unmistakable rumble of tanks shook the earth. It was Patton's Third Army, a spearhead of American liberation. Bud, weighing 20 pounds less than when he had been shot down, a stark testament to the privations of captivity, was finally free. His journey home, however, was not immediate. He boarded a Liberty ship, a slow, ponderous vessel packed with other returning soldiers and airmen, its bow pointed towards the distant shores of America. The war, that all-consuming, defining conflict, officially ended while he was still at sea, the news reaching him over crackling radio waves, a distant echo of the cataclysm he had just survived. Back in stateside debriefing centers, the intelligence officers were debriefing the debriefers. A chilling question hung in the air, a puzzle that vexed the highest echelons of Allied command. How had the Germans known the 385th's call sign weeks in advance? How had they so consistently anticipated Allied movements and targets? It was a mystery that had cost lives and aircraft. It was in that stark, clinical setting, as the puzzle pieces of wartime intelligence were meticulously reassembled, that Bud finally understood the true, devastating cost of that seemingly innocent cup of coffee. A wave of nausea washed over him, a profound sickness in his gut, as the full weight of his unwitting contributions to the enemy's intelligence efforts settled upon him. But amidst the sickness, another emotion stirred, complex and unsettling. It was an undeniable, almost grudging admiration for an adversary who had beaten him and so many others without ever raising a hand. Hans Scharf had waged a war of wits, a battle of psychology, and he had won. Driven by this profound realization, Bud sat down and meticulously wrote a report. He detailed every conversational trap, every silk-stocking ruse, every subtle psychological manipulation Scharf had employed. The Pentagon, recognizing its critical but sensitive nature, dutifully filed it away under ultra-secret, a testament to its importance. And then, in the vast bureaucratic machinery of military intelligence, it was largely forgotten for decades, its lessons awaiting a later, more receptive generation. The guns fell silent, the bombs ceased to drop, and the world began the arduous process of rebuilding. Hans Scharf, the master interrogator, survived the brutal fall of Berlin, a city reduced to charred ruins. He surrendered to American forces. His war, like so many others, concluded not with a bang, but with a weary capitulation. He spent 2 unexpected years in a POW cage, not as a defiant enemy, but as a peculiar kind of educator, teaching interrogation ethics to American officers. His methods, once a closely guarded secret, were now being dissected and studied by his former adversaries. It was an extraordinary, almost ironic turn of events. In 1948, seeking a new life away from the shattered remnants of his homeland, Scharf emigrated to California, the land of endless sunshine and boundless opportunity. He started anew, not as an intelligence officer, but as an artisan. He designed intricate mosaics for the burgeoning freeway system. His meticulous eye for detail now applied to public art. His talent flourished, and he founded a successful tile company, his work eventually adorning the iconic Cinderella Castle walkway at Disneyland, a place of pure fantasy and joy, far removed from the grim realities of war. Decades passed. Bud Miller, his wartime experiences fading into the background of a civilian life, became a commercial pilot for TWA, traversing the skies in a different kind of aircraft, carrying passengers instead of bombs. One day, flipping through a magazine, his eye caught an article, a feature spread on a renowned artisan who once questioned downed flyers. The name Hans Scharf leaped off the page, instantly resurrecting a flood of complex memories. The unexpectedness of it all, the sheer improbability of his former captor becoming a celebrated artist in America, spurred Bud to action. He wrote a letter. Scharf's reply arrived on elegant company letterhead, his familiar, impeccably polite tone undiminished by the passage of time. "Dear Bud," it began, "let us share that cinnamon coffee again, this time on Sunset Boulevard." It was an invitation to close a circle that had been opened in the most unlikely of circumstances. They met in 1969. No rank, no medals, no uniforms. Just two grandfathers, their hair now silvered by time, sipping espresso at an outdoor cafe, while children chased pigeons nearby, oblivious to the profound history unfolding between the two men. Bud's wife, sensing the momentousness of the occasion, snapped a photo. It captured them perfectly. Former enemies, shoulder to shoulder, smiling the same slightly crooked, knowing smile. It was a powerful tableau, a testament to the enduring capacity for human connection, even after the deepest divisions of war. The story of Hans Scharf and Bud Miller is more than just a captivating anecdote from World War II. It is a profound lesson in human psychology, a masterclass in the art of influence. Scharf's method, in its elegant simplicity, was revolutionary. People open up when they feel heard, not hunted. They reveal their truths, not under duress, but within the subtle embrace of rapport and perceived empathy. It was a stark contrast to the brutal, often counterproductive, interrogation techniques that dominated conventional wisdom. The efficacy of his approach was not lost on subsequent generations of military thinkers. Decades after the war, U.S. military academies began to study his techniques, dissecting his conversational traps and psychological gambits. The Marine Corps Field Manual, renowned for its pragmatic approach to combat and intelligence, even codified it, giving it the formal designation of empathy-based elicitation. Modern intelligence trainers, tasked with extracting vital information in complex global environments, now routinely cite the enduring value of rapport over rubber hoses, recognizing that genuine connection, however manufactured, can unlock secrets that brute force never could. It's a testament to the idea that the human mind, when treated with a semblance of respect, can be a more permeable barrier than any physical torture could ever breach. Meanwhile, Bud Miller, carrying the weight and wisdom of his unique experience, spent his retirement years lecturing cadets, not about aerial combat, but about humility. He reminded them, with a quiet intensity, that even a lone pilot, caught in the grand machinery of war, could inadvertently alter history with a single, careless chuckle over a piece of apple strudel. His message was clear. The seemingly insignificant moments, the casual conversations, can carry the most profound strategic weight. The moral of their story, then, is a timeless one, a truth that transcends the battlefields of the past and resonates powerfully in the present. Information, that most precious commodity in any conflict, bleeds fastest not through the veins of cruelty, but through the open channels of conversation. And sometimes, in the complex tapestry of human interaction, the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun or a bomb or a threat. It is genuine politeness, wielded with surgical precision, capable of disarming the most hardened of foes. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that our expectations of conflict, of enemy behavior, can often be our greatest vulnerability. History, in its grand sweeping narratives, often remembers the thunderous dogfights, the devastating bomb runs, and the epic clashes of armies. These are the dramatic, visceral moments that capture our imaginations. But the quieter battles of wits, The subtle psychological duels fought in drab green rooms decide wars just as surely, just as profoundly. They are the unseen forces, the hidden currents that shape outcomes and alter destinies. If this extraordinary story, this unexpected encounter between a pilot and his interrogator, has changed how you see conflict, how you understand the intricate dance of human interaction under duress, then we urge you to hit that like button. And more importantly, drop a comment below, telling us what you would have done in Bud's boots. Would you have maintained your silence? Or would Sharf's uncanny blend of empathy and cunning have found a way to pry open your defenses? Subscribe for more forgotten tales from the skies, for more insights into the human drama that unfolds beneath the roar of engines and the chaos of battle. And please, share this story with a friend who still clings to the outdated notion that torture works, that brutality is the only path to truth. Because the remarkable truth is, a cup of coffee and a few cartoons just might have saved more lives and extracted more vital intelligence than fire and torment ever could. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most profound victories are won not by force, but by the subtle, unexpected power of human connection.